Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen with all of you, and we're going to go ahead with a little slightly formal introduction, then we'll go ahead. So hi, I'm Christina Fernandez. I'm an instructional assistant 2 with Learning Resources here at Homestead Campus. And today I'm going to walk you through Intro to Microsoft 365. I should probably have the camera on, shouldn't I? That would have been a smart move for me. Okay, perfect. So hello, I'm Christina. I'm going to walk you through the Microsoft 365 suite today. You've already given me your emails. Thank you so much for that. And before we go ahead and roll into the rest of the suite and kind of walk through the basics, we're going to be covering Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. But I want you to know that you have access to the entire suite as a student through Miami-Dade. You'll be able to access it online or through your phones, and you can even do an installation for your PC or Mac if you have one. I'm going to go ahead and drop that link in the chat. That way you can have access to it. If it will allow me to open, there we go. So that's our Office 365 page. Once you click in and sign with your student account, you can follow the process. You can download the suite and you'll just have access to it. That way you don't have to spend your own money or anything like that. Once again, we will only be covering Word, Excel, and PowerPoint today. There are other parts of the suite, but this is just an introduction to walk you through the basics that you may or may not already know, and then get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty on the specifics. Like I said earlier, if you have questions about a thing you've seen done in Microsoft before, there'll always be time at each section to talk about those things and try to really get into the details of how you would go about doing something in a specific format. Okay? All right. So first of all, as you can see on your screen, we're going to go ahead and start with Microsoft Word. The first thing I want you to know, just anytime you start up the suite, you have this option pop up to you, New. You see, of course, your usual blank document, but you also have the possibility to select anything from here in different formats. For example, various resumes, which you can already see at the top here, but just so you can see a little bit more of the various formats available for you. Various resume styles, depending on what you're looking for. If it's something more colorful, if you require a portrait of any kind for a resume that you're designing. And they also have the text pre-made. Let's just show you the way that the business cover letter. That's fine, but we want our resumes. So let's just go with the Bubbles resume. It was already at the top. So if you click it, you say you want to create, you'll load in. You can replace this with any image that you like. You can just go ahead and click on it if it will let me. And insert your own up here. We'll undo that for now. You can put in your first name, last name, job title, position. The way that it's highlighting is to make sure you're staying inside the brackets. That's just a feature of how each template is designed for you to have easy access to. That way you're not scrambling over formatting. If you go, oh, there's only 3 job titles and I need to expand on this way more, I've had more jobs than this, you can always just select that little piece, copy, go to the end, paste. It's just there to contain the information, not to limit you from adding more. So as you work your way through the template, you can always duplicate, you can keep going from there. Education, communication, leadership, and references, which you can say available upon request. You can say anything here that you'd like. You can also just copy large sections of the text. So if you go from here, you're like, hey, this has experience in education, but I would like a place for, say, certificates. Sometimes come up on entry-level resumes when you're first starting out. So you can instead rename it, change the formatting as you please, work from there. The templates are very malleable. Their purpose is to give you something that is streamlined for you to fill out, but not to limit your ability to fill out an application or a resume or anything. So you're always able to add more to it as you go, if you would like. But that's just that, and we're not going to stay on that for too long. So whenever you go to File, New, all the templates will open up again. Again, resumes are not the only thing you can access from here. Just for a quick example, again, to look at, we have a fashion brochure we can load into. If you need to design something that's stylized, you should have access to the pictures here. If you click on them and you can edit and move them around. Oh, there's a box stylized over here. These actually may be background outlays. I haven't opened this particular template before, but yeah, these are available for use. And I encourage you very much, if you ever go, oh, I have this huge project I'm supposed to do, I have a report right here. There's a format available for you. You can always change the colors. You can always move stuff around. You can say, I kind of like how this one looks, but I would like this section of formatting better. But start with the templates. If you feel really lost, if you're not certain of how to manage it, start there. So the other important feature sitting inside of New, the really useful one, is that we have the option to take a tour with Word. This is available on on each and every program inside of the Microsoft 365 suite. So you go to Excel, you have a tour. You go to PowerPoint, you have a tour, so on and so forth. And it'll always give you the very basic overview of how each of these suites work. And then you can kind of drill in and see more about what you would like to do. So I'm just going to crack this open. And we're going to go along a little. Just as a question, someone has joined us. Pardon me. Hello, Lizbeth. Hi, nice to have you with us. I got started on a little bit of the beginning of the suite. So if you can, please just drop your email in the chat for me. That way we can add you to the roster for this workshop. And I'm just going to very quickly go over what we just discussed, which was that over here in the Office suite, we have access over here in New, File New, to different templates that you can use in order to do anything with Microsoft, any part of the Microsoft suite. In this case for Word, you have access to resumes, calendars, reports, even fashion brochures available, and you can use the search feature up here to look for something along those lines. And when you're starting, I would encourage you to take a look at something if you're not really sure what kind of format you'll be using for anything you might need in the future. All right, so those are just the basics. We're gonna look at the specifics of Microsoft Word a little bit more now. And there will always be time for questions. So if you have questions about the templates and everything, we can come back to that when I reach the end of the section, okay? All right, so we were inside of our Take a Tour. I'm gonna crack that open again. So this just goes over the basics of Microsoft. Let me move the ribbon out of the way. Up here at the top, from File all the way to Acrobat, this entire section of blue that basically goes up to the ruler line, this is called your ribbon. That's across any one of the programs inside of the Microsoft Office suite. You do absolutely everything you need to from here, with the exception of downloading an add-on. That is not something we'll get into today. This is an intro. This isn't everything we can cover. From home, we can do all of our basic editing. This document discusses some of that, the ability to save, share, collaborate, visuals. You can insert pictures, not just ones that you've downloaded, but also ones from online. And Microsoft has this nice feature where it uses the Bing engine to let you get any of these things from online. And you can just do a basic search, Apple, Creative Commons. That way you're not hopping on copyright law whenever you're trying to construct something inside of Word or any of their other programs. This is across the board. You can always pull pictures from online. You also have shapes available if you need to insert them in a document for some reason, 3D models, but then you would have to construct. Icons are available. Again, they have kind of their own that you can use rather than having to hunt for any and throw them into the document yourself. There's a couple other features like headers and footers, which are how you enter, you wrote your headers in high school, you would go name, date, period, everything, that kind of thing for the headers. Page numbers are available as well. Everything is here that you need to make something that you've seen in a book. Let's put it a little bit like that. Over here, we have our design, which one of the really nice things about the Microsoft suite across any of the programs that you'll use is that you can stylize. If you don't have any sense of design, if that's not something you've been able to practice or haven't really been taught, then this is a great tool to use, because then you're able to go, well, I don't know what an Arial and a Calibri font are and whether they go together or not, but you know who does? The design tab that I can hover over and see what it's going to look like. If you see the text is changing every time I hover over a new section. It's adjusting the headers. It's adjusting the main body text. Some of these look better than others, but that's just because we already have a pre-formatted document here that we're working with. And that's always an option. Once you click on them, they set, but you can always just Control Z, or rather undo up here on the top left, in order to undo any changes that you've made as far as anything you do, not just design. Colors are also available. Again, you know, you don't need to know how colors work together. They'll just apply to the document. Fonts for the same kind of thing, but this is an overall one instead of the formatting that the themes and designs kind of let you do. Over here in our layout, we have our basics. If you've ever seen someone edit a Word document so that it looks a lot more like a magazine, you do that by going to columns and saying how many of them you want. The way this works is that you'll keep putting down text until you hop to the next column. Kind of pasting here, ignore how that format's going. And then it'll continue naturally into the next page. You can also change the orientation of your page from portrait to a landscape style, which is when you hold the paper sideways. Portrait, landscape. Change the margins of your paper. Don't really recommend doing this too much. Printers tend to have their own formatting rules. So when you're trying to put out a page, you have to be really certain that you can adjust not just the Word documents rules on how margins are printed, but also the printer itself. It's a little finicky. If you have someone who knows their printers, I would recommend collaborating with them on that. So try to stick to your normal margins, at least in the Word suite. But you can always mess with these. And as far as digitally putting these out, then yeah, you don't have any margin limits that you necessarily experience. You can just go, this is a PDF. It doesn't have any margins at all. This is a whole image, and I don't need to worry about anything else. But that's, again, drilling down to something more specific, and we're going to keep going over. I need to undo what I did to the columns. We're just going to go down. See, the nice thing about the undo button on the top left is that you can go back as far in your history as you need to. So I just restored everything back to normal. References, this is some of the things you would use for constructing a paper. You have the ability to insert footnotes, which if you've ever seen more academic text is like putting a 1 notation right here and saying something at the end of your text. So here, this is for references. This is how you construct them if it's an easier way to navigate the document. So see, this little I says, there's a footnote or an endnote about this particular section. Let me scroll to the end and see if they put their reference or something else. Just an easier way to format and a little bit nicer too, just to work with. This relates to mailing. We're not going to really cover that here. This is your review. It's super helpful. You have a built-in spelling and grammar checker. You have a thesaurus if you've decided that you've used one word too many times. If you've said flower too many times, maybe you want to use a rose, maybe you want to use an iris. This is just a basic example of improvising that. You have a word count. So you can actually see how many pages you have without necessarily needing to. Sometimes I've done this. I've kind of gone and go, how many pages do I have? 8? Nice. Instead of going word count button, quick count. So when you're checking your papers, your discussion posts, because I know we have those on Canvas classes a lot, instead of, if the counter isn't working on Canvas, although it should have its own, you can just throw it here. Or you don't have access to Canvas for a minute, your internet went down, but you do have Word, throw it open, get your discussion post ready for the next time. The counter is right there for you to work with. You have read aloud for anybody who needs speech reading. There's accessibility settings across all of the Microsoft Suite, not just here, available. You can use the basic translate and language formats, and you can even comment on a page, which I will get into if someone asks, but I'm going to leave that be for now because we are spending a bit of time on this. View changes the way the document looks. So just so you can see read mode expands the entire page. It makes the text a lot bigger. You kind of flip from each page to the next, and it's putting both pages side by side and zooming them in so they become easier to read for anyone who wants to take a look at them. You can easily exit by hitting escape on your keyboard. You're back to the print layout, which is our default formatting. If you want to see how something looks on a website, click right here. I don't know too much personally about web publication through Word, and we're not necessarily going to get into it, but I would recommend exploring this avenue if you were interested, because it might be a little bit easier than certain other formats. You can construct an outline, which this kind of took our document and ran with it, but you can make an outline of your own and make drills. And you can even construct a draft from here, which again, it's kind of just taking the way that our current document looks and throwing it in here. You'll see a bit more about what a good outline looks like in the PowerPoint suite. Getting out of here, there we go. Help is always available inside of Word or any of the other programs inside of the suite, just always available. You can ask specific questions about stuff inside of Microsoft, something glitched out of you, you can ask. You actually have contact support if the program is crashing on you itself, or even if you just really need a hand with something that you cannot get to work for reasons that you do not understand, because maybe it's a weird formatting error that has happened to you, and now you don't know what undo you have to click to do. These are all things available, plus more training, where you can hop onto Microsoft, the website, and just the program itself, and take a look at what's available to you there. How do you format text? How do I just get started? How do I write and edit, save and print? How do I use Word for School? What's the methods that are best available to me? All of that and more is available in here. And this is a button that's, again, available across every program in the suite to try and get in more on the details of what each does. That being said, I ran over a little bit on time for this section. I just love hearing myself talk. So as far as Word goes, what questions do any of you have? And you have the option to unmute yourselves now if you would rather not type in the chat. You should have access to all tools inside of the suite. Let me verify something really quick about what is in Microsoft 365. So you should have access to Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Publisher, Access, and you shouldn't be limited by what's available to you. Let's see. The only limitations you might encounter, and you'll see this on that link I gave you, is that for Mac, not all of the programs are included. Same thing for iPhone and Android. Like, you're not going to get Publisher or Access on your phone. But you will have access to everything completely, every program in the suite. It's listed right there, from Word all the way to InfoPath, which frankly is a program that even I know nothing about. But we're not here to talk about that one today. Does that kind of answer your question, Gabriel? Nice. Are you working on a Windows or a Mac machine? Okay, that might be slightly complicated. I would have to see about the limitations. Chromebooks tend to, by Google's design, restrict you to what their programs are inside of the store and stuff, unless the OS is designed otherwise. So some of them will go, you can only get apps from the Google store, and other ones will actually have the freedom to let you download other things. It completely depends on what OS is in your computer. I would encourage you to go to the About. You should be able to access this through search on inside of your Chromebook. Try and search for the About page so you can get the edition of your operating system for Chromebook, and then look it up on Google and see if you have the ability to download outside programs, which in this case will be basically anything non-Google or off of the Play Store. It just depends. Does that help? Okay, I'm gonna assume you're looking for that right now. In the meantime, does anyone else have any other questions on Microsoft Word before we move on to the next part of the suite? This can be about design, it can be about a template. Lizbeth, you weren't here at the beginning. Would you like to look again very briefly at the templates that are available to you in Microsoft Word? I'm gonna get some water. Word seems to listen. Try clicking here. This should be available to you. Over here on the top right, where you see my name, does that instead say sign in for you? You should have access. Are you a Homestead student? Okay. Because I have some background in IT, but unless you're close by, I can't do too much because I can't see what's happening on your screen. Go ahead and stop by Hialeah Learning Resources. If they can't help you with accessing through sign-in or otherwise, go ahead and head down to CTS, which will be on the 3rd floor, just under. They should be from the elevator straight down the hall and to the left. They should have an open door. You can knock and ask them about installing that, or if you need to do anything else to get access. It seems the program is there, but it might be a slightly different one. So I would just talk with them just to be like totally sure about the access you have. Okay. Perfect. All right. Since no one has any more questions about Word, we're going to go ahead and move on to Excel. You might see that I have several of these open because each template opens up a new section. Oops. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and go to Excel now. So same rules as with Word. Whenever you open up Excel for the first time, you will always have new. And if you ever need to go back to this area, let me adjust this camera a little bit because I look quite silly just talking to the side. Too short for this. Okay. So anytime file new, or when you open it for the first time new, again, you have formats, templates that are available to you for anything that you might need. In this case, you might find the student schedule very useful. So you can block out your time and get an estimate for how long you're spending in classes and even plan out the remainder of your day here. I'm going to move a little bit faster because I did go over on Word. You also have calendars available, just like in Word, and you may find this one a little bit easier to navigate just because Excel is constructed in cells instead of in, sentences. You also have budget overviews if you want to find a simple way to manage your money, inventory, daily work schedules, again, if you want to get organized. There's all kinds here for you to explore, and I would encourage you to look through them and see if anything constructed in like blocky ways that you've seen is here in some way, shape, or form. Don't look for a resume in here. You might find something, but it's probably not going to be really comfortable to edit at all or put in your information. So just like before, we're going to crack open the Take a Tour. Unlike with Word, we actually, well, I shouldn't necessarily say that. Like with Word, we have access to stuff through here, but this is a bit more in the means of letting you do things through example instead of just telling you the features are there, which depending, on what you're used to doing with learning can be really, really helpful. And especially in Excel, which is a bit of a more complicated program inside the suite. Again, this is our ribbon at the top. I'm actually going to let the tour itself speak a bit more for what features are available. When you're working inside of Excel, you are working on the principle that everything, every column has a letter and every row has a number. So it's treated like coordinates on an X and Y grid, which, we got that in our math classes and stuff. And that's how everything is targeted. I can't really, in a brief overview, show you how to create formats like this where you've created text boxes, but that's not the important part. What you go to Excel for is numbers and tables and calculations and generating charts from that information and using formulas, which this tour talks about a bit. I would encourage you to go through these, but the bigger issue that I usually see, or rather something that people aren't usually introduced to, is that they don't know some simple features that can really help them out. I'm trying to see which one it was. Tables. Table creation in Microsoft Excel. A lot of the time I see people use the cells and put in the information, but not necessarily construct a table, which it's a bit like a piece of paper if the piece of paper was digital, but to make your life a little easier. When you create a table inside of Excel, you get the ability to filter the information inside of it, to search for a specific part of it, to highlight duplication inside of the table. So if you're looking for how many times you've done a survey of apples and you need to see every time someone put apples on a line that's for oranges, you can look for something like that. But constructing the table starts like this. You type in the information. You go, okay, I have my departments, produce, bakery, deli. I have my categories, beef, chicken, veggies, fruits. I have my months, October, November, December. You take the top left corner, hold and click. You drag it down to the bottom right corner. You go to insert and you select table. It will always ask you, where is the data for your table? This is the selection you've made. You don't necessarily need to worry about that. You've already handpicked what that selection is. What you do need to look at is whether or not your table has headers. In this case, we do have headers. We have specific listings for each of our things. We know what our departments are. We know what our categories are. We know October, November, and December both have the amounts of each thing. We have table headers. But in the case that, let's say, just to show. It won't let me do it like that. That's fine. In the case that all of these things are missing, you no longer have headers. Excel is relatively smart. It knows when you do have headers and when you don't. So when you do that, it's like, okay, I don't have any headers. This is just column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5, and you can name them whatever you like. You click, you type. That's how editing works in Excel. But when I do have headers, click top left, drag to bottom right, insert table. I have headers, it's checked. Now I can look at everything with this. I don't have to write down department, category, October, November, December. Headers are already there. They're at the top of the list. They're how you control everything else in the column that they're in. So just to take a brief look at filtering. When I click on department, this little drop-down arrow, I have the opportunity to sort A to Z, Z to A by color, which we don't have anything color-coded here, so that's not important right now, to filter, which if you're filtering something, and department, let's say, show rows where department equals produce. But that's a more complicated way of doing a filter in this case, which is kind of just, all right, let me just uncheck everything and click produce. And I did the same thing, but faster. Text filters become really useful in the case that you're looking for data in a very, very long list, at which point you can go, well, I don't remember what produce was necessarily. I only know it starts with a P. So say it begins with P. And then you're able to find produce that way, because imagine it's like a thousands long list. That's kind of the point where you start using text filters to help yourself out here. It's kind of a general explanation for that, so we'll keep trucking a bit. You do have the option to create drop downs inside of Excel, which can help a lot. It's outside of the table format, so this is just selecting that multiple things can go somewhere. Let me show you analyzing. So when you select an entire table and you go, okay, I want to analyze that data, you can select how that data is shown just at a quick glance. And this is still keeping the table format, so it's kind of highlighting and showing you patterns that you might not necessarily have seen before. This is just formatting, so you can go, well, now I know what money looks like in relation to everything else here, because I can see 10,000 is so little compared to the 200,000, which is what we're basing this entire table off of. And that color coding can kind of help you depending on what is more useful to you, to your eyes, to your brain, but also if you're presenting it to someone. You can also just make a chart, which the nitty-gritties of charts is another class entirely. They're very easy to kind of visually mess with you. And if you can ever take a course on charts, I would highly encourage it. But that is not this workshop, unfortunately. We're going to keep going here to pivot tables because this is really cool. So when you make a pivot table, it actually already generated one here, but I'm going to try and do it again anyway, because I think they're really neat. You go to insert, you say, I want to create a pivot table based off of this entire table that I've selected with my own cursor. You're going to say, you can put on the same worksheet, which they did right here, but I'm going to put on a new one because I just want to look at it. I think it's cool. And a pivot table is basically taking this massive table of data you have and then deciding how you want to display it. So similar to charts, as I said before, this kind of depends on what you want to see, but this is a tool used for analysis. Got in the way. I will undo this so you can see the tool that they created instead of what I'm doing here. So the pivot table they produced specifically wanted to focus on what beer in total, see how there's two blocks? What the sum of beer is. So by creating a pivot table, they did it. They've done beer, soda, and wine is all totaled up like this, instead of the table having to be like, all right, let me sit here and add 1,400 and 750 and see what it turns out to. It does it automatically. That is something I would encourage you to experiment with just for the point of data analysis in classes. And this kind of covers Excel as far as what I wanted you to get a brief look at. Does anyone have more specific questions about Excel, a project they've seen before, how to create certain formulas? I can touch on those briefly so you can see what's available, if anything. I rushed a little bit here, so we actually have plenty of time if you have any questions. Trying not to talk myself hoarse, but not work. No takers? Okay. We're going to go ahead and move on. Oh. Exactly. Perfect. Yes, Michael, that is exactly correct. You get your information. Thank you, Claire. I'm very happy it is. You get the information from pivot tables and make it very specific. It is analysis. It's drilling down to look at a specific data point that you didn't see before, using a different visual representation. You are correct. Alrighty. So we're going to go ahead and move on. I will open up one last Q&A session at the end of this workshop so that if you have any specific questions, we can touch on those. But we're going to go ahead and go to PowerPoint. The folly of having several Excels open. Okay, perfect. Okay, PowerPoint, same story as the rest. You open it, you get to see all of your different formats. In the case of PowerPoint, you can look around for education kind of styled stuff. All kinds of formats again. Charts and diagrams are available, which a family tree, which is a little bit more quirky than anything we've seen so far from the rest of the programs in the suite. A scatter box with a dashboard. A smart chart. Again, we're coming back to kind of a family tree format, but there's also different formats that accommodate like smart thinking or flowchart style presentations if you need to do something along those lines. But mostly what we know PowerPoint for is presentations. So I'm going to take you on the tour, but I'm also going to show you a lot more of the tools that are there in the ribbon, because we come again to a very general thing. If you have ever used PowerPoint at any point in your life, then you sat there and you messed with the animations and how your slides transitioned from one to another, and you experimented with the whole thing because it was really cool. If you were like me in elementary school, you then tried your best to put YouTube videos and failed a couple times, but it got a lot better over the years, and that's a lot easier now. So just to go quickly through this slide deck so you can see. It gives you your basics. Again, you can get any images from online as well as stuff that you've downloaded yourself. Online does have the benefit of having Creative Commons checked off, so you're not at risk of any copyright during presentations you may have. It also has something called Morph now, instead of just animations, which I'm kind of going to let this little video speak for itself. It is a subscription-only feature, so this is something you get by having Microsoft Office 365. So Morph transposed the planets and moved them around so they were in a straight line. Then you got that. It's kind of just like the way animations and transitions have their purpose and their place inside of PowerPoint presentation. Hello. Sorry. Hello, Sarah? Okay. Sarah, we're going to let you load in. We are at the last part of our presentation, but we will have room for questions after PowerPoint. If you could just go ahead and leave your email, your school email in the chat for me, please, so I can add you to the roster. That would be very helpful. Thank you. Oh, and Lizbeth, no, yeah, I noted you down. Okay. Lizbeth, perfect. Okay, so we were talking about Morph. This slide shows you how to set it up. It shows you how to use Share and Collaborate, which we will actually discuss towards the end because this is a feature available across all. But now we'll come back to the top and we'll talk a bit more about the nitty-gritties of PowerPoint. So these are some cool features. When you construct a PowerPoint, usually you go and you see if you can alter the slide deck through the prearranged formatting. This one is going to be a little harder to alter, so we're going to actually open up a new blank document so you can see what this looks like. So you hover over designs and they're applied to your entire slide deck. And then move on to and apply to the rest of your slides. Transitions allow you to fade from one slide into the other, change how things look, and can even be done specifically on text to change how it looks. As this is something a little bit outside, but as a general rule of thumb, the less animation, the better. You want to try and stick to practical effects that don't take away from the points of your presentation. So if every box of text in your PowerPoint is moving, that's probably not a really good way to do it, just because it becomes at that point more distracting than it is helpful for emphasizing your points and what you're trying to discuss during the course of your presentation. Over here in Slideshow, we have the option to kind of manage how we look at our presentation from the beginning, started from the current slide. You can actually present online. That way you drop someone a link and they can just watch online. if you're doing something along those lines. If, per se, I'm streaming this to you through Zoom, we're doing a video call. But maybe that isn't possible, or maybe it just looks really strange on your side, and for some reason your internet just isn't cooperating. Maybe you want to drop them the link instead, and you can walk them through the presentation that way. Or you're turning it into a professor, and they would really like the presentation, can't attach it, send them the online link instead, they can look at it there. Other thing, again, we have our review tools. We can check our spelling. We can use accessibility tools. We can actually draw on slides, which isn't a feature that we saw available earlier in Excel or Word, for example. This is usually for annotation purposes. You don't really want this to be sitting on your slide presentation when you get there, because it will just sit there. So you can just Control-Z your way out of that, or erase in the case of using that. I'm going to talk about view right now, but really quickly, what I wanted was, where has it gone? It has eluded me. We'll come back to the point I wanted to make. I remember now. Okay, so over here at the bottom, you have your slide deck. You go, I want to talk about fish. Scientific name, all the details. When you construct your PowerPoint, you generally want things to be short and concise. You're not going to type an entire paragraph of information there, because then, thank you, Michael. You're not going to type an entire paragraph of information there, because you're trying to use the bullet points inside of a PowerPoint presentation to remind you of where your thoughts lead. You're going to follow a logical progression from your first point, flow into subpoints, flow into your second point, so on and so forth. But I don't know about you, but I can't memorize absolutely everything in my slide. So what I can do instead is I can go down here to the bottom, and I can click notes, and I can add paragraphs and paragraphs of information here. Fish are cool. You know, that's all I need to talk about in this presentation. You can put entire chunks of information here. Of course, that's still a bit of a problem if you have to read entire paragraphs to get through your slideshow presentation, but notes aren't visible to people from presenter mode. I will show you what that looks like from here. But whenever you are doing, say, a presentation on 2 screens, you're able to stand at the podium, and the projector is considered a second screen rather than the same screen duplicated. It's very helpful, because presenter mode does is that it shows you a back end, which is that you see what slide is coming up next. I'm just going to show you now. There's no point in. Okay. So let's make sure the share is properly showing which window we're on. Okay. So what you are seeing right now is the back end of presenter mode. And what I'm going to show you is the front end, which is the part you're very familiar with. You're also going to see the chat and everything. Because there we go. Okay. But this is the front end. When I go back, you can see the first slide. When I go forward, you can see the next. Bring you back to my end. So that front end, that part with the slideshow itself, that is what everyone else sees if presenter mode is set up correctly. But this, the back end, this is what you see. You can have your notes here. Everything that we wrote about our fish slide is here. Test, 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 fish are cool. Now you can elaborate on that. Notes are important. They help you elaborate a bit more if you can't, hold all that information in your brain. And a lot of times you can't. We're not going to remember everything, but instead of having note cards in hand, if you have the chance, you can throw your note cards right there digitally. They're available for you to use. They're available for you to drill into and discuss and use more. You can even put little reminders for yourself, like saying, hey, at this point in the presentation, we can take some questions as long as we've hit this time mark. You check your watch, you're like, okay, we're 15 minutes in, perfect. There's room for questions for 3 minutes, keep an eye on the clock. But that's just a reminder to yourself. You won't always remember how you have constructed your presentation because of nerves, because it was rushed and maybe you didn't get to practice it the night before. But you can always leave yourself little reminders and things that will help you and make a better presentation for yourself. So we're just going to hit escape. We're going to shrink this down, and we can always click this back out so nobody sees that. Again, notes are only for you. They're for you to view. They won't show up during the slide presentation. The only reason you could see it is because I'm sharing the screen with you so that you can see that end. And now we're going to look at view. So sometimes people will ask you to print out slides for the class to have on hand for handout purposes for viewing. If you want to look at how that looks like, we can go to our handout master. Wait, that one's not quite right. Okay. Oh, actually, that might be, okay, forget what I just said. I want to show you something else first. Okay. PowerPoint has the ability to have a normal view. Just like Microsoft Word, we can look at certain types of views. So when you hit outline, you can create an outline for yourself. The same way that you can construct the notes. You can go, you know what's important when I discuss this title slide for Welcome to PowerPoint? Talking about 5 tips for a simpler way to work inside of it. You know what's super cool about this slide? It's that the designer helps you get your point across, so on and so forth. This outline is just a glance over, the same way notes functions, and it's meant for you to see. See how every section doesn't have this entire, like, Morph has all this information right here. You can make it smaller if you wanted. It's not going to mess with it. It will mess with it because I lied. But you make that information important, depending on how it's laid out in the slide. The slide sorter view lets you rearrange things from a top level. I can make 3, 2, and 2, 3. I can move 2 all the way to 8 and switch them back if I'd like or not at all. I can shuffle up this entire deck and do whatever I'd like with it. Your notes page, if you're going to print out your notes, if you have typed up notes, but it's going to be a physical presentation where you don't have easy access to a podium, this is the simple way to just print it out as is without having to go back and go, well, now I've got to copy paste everything into Microsoft Word. No, you don't. You can attach your notes to each of your slides respectively and go through each one, make sure they're there, and move on from there. Reading view is just like Microsoft Word's web view a bit, so you can get a closer look. Sorry, reading view. So you can zoom in a bit, get a closer look. You can always escape using escape. I'm going to show you something that's not necessarily an essential tool unless you're doing something very specific, but I think could be potentially very useful. And that is the Slide Master. The Slide Master helps you decide from the top down how you want everything inside of a presentation to look. This is a format constructor. If you want everything to be in this style, if this is how you want your master title slide to be, then everything will be orange and the master title has to be placed in a certain place. If this is how you want everything inside of this information screen to look like, then this is what it has to look like. You've created restrictions. You've created a format that everyone else will need to edit in the method of. This includes anything like putting a picture. Maybe that picture can't be edited because you did it on the master slide. This is very specific. I would encourage you to look more into it based on Microsoft's resources rather than just purely experimenting. But if for any reason you need to construct something that looks and feels a certain way and give it to someone else to work on, and there is just no way you can allow them to change the stylization or the arrangement of information, this is the way to do it. And a good example, for, I don't know if any of you have ever seen any MDC presentations that are specifically school ordained. This is kind of what you would look at from the top down. You would be able to put the MDC logo in the top left corner or something. You make sure it's on every slide and everything has to be in a specific shade of blue and so on and so forth to arrange that information. Again, a little more specific than everything else we covered, but something that's, you know, a tool you could use for the future. So I did stretch this one a little bit. Before I forget, this is the last thing for PowerPoint. If you go to File and you go to Print, you have the option, this is very important, to print slides a certain way. So you can choose to print each one page by page, or you can say that instead of doing page by page, I want my notes. Fish are cool. Or you want your outline, which is just a single page, the summary that you've made for yourself about what the presentation is. Or you want 2 slides to a page, or 3. And you know what? Would like some funny lines next to those. Or the entire deck, all 9 slides in 1 page. Those are all options that are available to you. And depending on what you're asked for in class, you'll end up using them. Okay, so now we have covered everything. I wanted to make sure we got that last bit. Do we have any questions about PowerPoint, about anything from the beginning? Sarah, you came in later. Oh, Sarah has left. She came and then she left. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about anything we've covered, including Microsoft, PowerPoint, Excel, Word, anything at all? Now is the time to ask. If you have a class project you're working on and you really need some help with formatting, you can ask me right now. I will give you some rough additions to help you get there. It is cool, Claire. I love notes. They have saved me more times than I can count. I wish the Zoom chat box would tell me when someone is typing or not, because it is silent to me. I'll actually kill the share for now. Now I'll leave it. No questions. Going once. Going twice. Okay. I'm going to stop the share, but you can still ask me questions if you want. Okay, so just to make sure I have everything. Thank you, thank you. Okay, that's going to wrap us up, but I'm going to leave a survey over here in the chat. I would ask that you please fill it out. This is for our workshop data. It's really important that we gather this information just so we know what to change, what to add, what would benefit all of you in the future whenever we hold these workshops. And I will be holding one again. If you find that this wasn't enough, if you need further instruction, if you go, I forgot to ask Christina this during the presentation and I don't know how else to reach her, you can come to the next one and come see me. Happy to help. Thank you so much for attending. I really appreciate all of you taking the time out of your day to come here. I really hope that I helped. And if you have any questions, you know, again, I'll be holding another workshop. You're always welcome to come back and we're happy to help, okay? Gabriel, I hope you get that fixed up soon. If not, you know, still here. We're here at Homestead. I hope you won't have to make that drive, but CTS and Learning Resources should be able to help you with the Chromebook. All right, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and close this out. Thank you so much. Please fill out that survey. I'm going to leave this open for a bit longer, but you are all free to go.